What about you? Do you like girls?
I don't know.
Boys?
I I I think that I like TV shows.
The television screen is the retina of the mind's eye. Therefore, whatever appears on the television screen emerges as raw experience for those who watch it. Therefore, television is reality, and reality is less than television.
My name is Devyn.
My name is George, and this is your 17th appointment with your Medicinema.
Today we discuss two horror films that use the TV screen as a central image with David Cronenberg's classic Videodrome and Jane Schoenbrun's new movie I Saw the TV Glow.
Since no big news really grabbed our attention, and there's kind of a lot to get to with these two movies, we will also instantly get into it and start with Videodrome.
Released in 1983, the film follows Max Wren, played by James Woods, a network programmer for a small exploitation TV station called Channel 83. We follow him get introduced to an underground show called Videodrome that they picked up with a pirate satellite dish. Containing only torture and murder, Max gets obsessed with Videodrome, starts losing grip on reality, and fully descends into madness as he takes some murderous commands by what is called the Signal. How do you feel about Videodrome?
Yeah, I love Videodrome. It's my favorite David Cronenberg. Yeah, I have lots of praise to give. I have many thoughts on this movie in general, and I'm looking forward to discussing it with you in detail. Devin, what's your experience with this movie, your relationship to it?
This is one of the remaining movies I had to see by him. I think I still have a few left, but it was one of the last movies I saw by him.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoyed it the first time I watched it. I rewatched it last week for this, and I gotta say I liked it a lot less this time. I really like what Cronenberg does with body horror. I like what he does with just weirdness. The Fly is one of my favorite, horror films, and Existence is probably one of my favorite weird psychological mindfuck movies ever made. Is it just fantastic? This movie, I don't know if it's because we live in a time where like it doesn't have the same impact with the analogy they're trying to make, I think.
I so disagree, but continue.
I think in a lot of ways we're way beyond all that shit, But I mean, we'll get there. But
Uh-huh.
I don't know if it's that or if it's that I just don't connect to it as much. But a lot of this movie just feels weird to be weird without as much really great narrative tissue for me. To lightly pick up on like what I mean by like it doesn't hit the same. Like a big factor in this is that it's snuff, right? It turns out this is real snuff video, right?
Mhm.
We live in a world where like you can scroll Facebook and accidentally see somebody die on video. Like it's just
Yeah, that's very much something that to me makes this movie age better than, like, that's a positive to me. Not that we can see this, but to me, this movie is very much ahead of its time and knew where things were going. In the interview in the TV show, his co-interviewee, I guess, the woman, says, "We live in overstimulated times." And it's very much about how everything has to be more extreme. Everything will get more extreme. The access to it will get easier. The things we see will get more extreme, and it's just in a downward spiral. Like, to me, the movie is very much about our obsession with getting more stimulated and more stimulated. And with this not only being before social media, but really before the internet as a whole. To me, this is just a prophecy of a movie. To me, that's not a downfall for Videodrome, that nowadays we will just randomly see POV footage of war from Ukraine or Israel or something, and you can just randomly stumble upon a video where someone dies. To me, that's kind of like the proof of what Videodrome wanted to say.
it does that good job of predicting the reality of the things you would see in the pushing of extremism and stuff, right? but where it pushes it as the audience being these kind of mindless, like craving, let's just watch brain rot, let's be brain rot. I don't know. I feel like that isn't the reality of most people that watch things, though. Videodrome makes it feel and sound like in the future, the highest rated TV shows will be violent. It almost made it seem like they were predicting a future where entertainment didn't need substance. It was just, let's watch a person get beat against a wall, and we're all going to enjoy watching that. And that isn't true. That isn't how humans turned out. That's not how we enjoy it. People still don't like that. That's not like, you know what I mean? I don't know. The allegory is there, but it feels fear-mongery almost to me.
I kind of disagree. At the beginning of the movie, Channel 83 gets established as the small channel. And I know that this one person that later turns out to be like a representative figure behind Videodrome tells him that this will make your channel explode or whatever. But that's just something one person basically claims. Because in the beginning, we already get established that this channel for its time is supposedly the extreme content. And they are still a very small TV station. I don't think it tries to claim that everything go down that road. To me, it more felt like the things we seek out to be extreme gotta get more and more extreme. Like no one's claiming that Videodrome will be the number one blockbuster or anything, but the thing shown in those niches just will escalate further and further. That's, I guess, how I took it.
So, like, Jackass, right?
Yeah.
Jackass is a really good example of just brain rot, pain, stupidity television, taking things to higher and higher degrees and stuff, right?
Yeah, or like the Joe Rogan thing he did initially, the TV show where they challenged
Fear
each other.
Factor.
Fear Factor, exactly, yeah.
Yeah. That, again, had a little more substance than the things that this was trying to put off. But either way, still, you are correct. Yeah, you're totally right. That's still the same line. That shit ain't popular anymore. I feel like we've, as a culture, at least, have moved past that already. So it's kind of like it was a time that I think was prevalent, especially that was building up, especially when Videodrome was made. But I think society figured itself out a little bit, and we've moved past that already.
I so disagree. Like within television, I can see that maybe.
Which is what which is what it's talking about, right? That's what it's talking about.
Yeah, it is, but it couldn't possibly have like predicted the internet as a new way of delivering this, but the way it talks about how Videodrome is this new form of entertainment and this new stimulation, to me very much applies to the way we interact with the internet nowadays. So to me, this just extends further than television. And you can't, like, one of the first things you mentioned was you could just randomly stumble upon actual murder videos, snuff videos on the internet. Ever since the Ukraine war, I've seen so many, videos from the front lines of Ukraine that I didn't ask for, but were super high up on Reddit or whatever. It's not like we moved on from extreme content and videos that are further in reality than they ever were back then.
No, I just think the difference is that where Videodrome tries to predict this idea that people will watch that and shove popcorn in their mouth. Those videos, in reality, nowadays, we see those because people are shaking their fist. We see those videos because it's trying to create awareness of those things, or, showing brutality, or showing, like, it's usually not like, let's all fucking watch the video for har fun. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It's not fully incorrect to me that what it's saying and stuff. I think it's just it didn't hit me the same these days. I want to be more optimistic than this movie is portraying.
I get that sentiment. That being said, I just don't mind exploring something in a very nihilistic way to make a point despite overshooting the target. Like that's just something that doesn't bother me.
That's fair.
I get your point. It is definitely more negative in the way it shows it than reality turned out to be. And I don't think that Cronenberg ever believed it will turn out that negative, but it's still like an entertainment program at the end of things, you know.
The German-speaking person isn't afraid to get a little nihilistic. I'm so surprised.
And the American can take the nihilism.
It's overly optimistic.
Yeah.
I'm an absurdist, is what it's actually called.
Yeah. Generally speaking, I am too.
Yeah. They bring up something in the movie in that same scene you're talking about in the early interview, and she says, aren't you worried about how, with violent television and violent stuff will create more violent nature in people or whatever, right? I'm really into the video game industry and in the culture of video games and stuff. That's been a constant fire since I was like 10 years old. Is like, violent video games. Do they make people violent?
Yeah, I remember all of that, yeah.
Yeah. And, every bit of science has shown that no, if anything, it makes people less violent, actually, because they have an outlet for this violence or whatever, right? And it's not real. It gives people like a distinction of reality versus non-reality, all this kind of shit, right? There's all
Which is
science
a
back
thing that he mentions as a reply to that statement in the
for
interview.
Sure. But I feel like the movie proves him wrong. I feel like the movie itself is like actually proving him wrong, though. Like it shows that the violence begets violence because he gets so obsessed with it, and he creates violence. He goes crazy. He starts shooting, and like it's almost like saying, "What if that came true? Oh, the horror." You know what I mean? And it's hard for me not to scoff at it a little bit now.
Mm.
And that's just, I don't know. I think that's just where I come from that. That's just my background on it. Makes me like not engage with that the same way.
To me, it really isn't a problem that the movie takes that what if and follows through on that. Like generally, that's to me always a nice little way to start off a story, to put a big what if in the middle of the room and then explore all of the things that this would lead to and what would that lead to and how would that impact this thing. So that's in general, like, I'm already here for that. But also, I just thought it's interesting the way it captured that kind of discussion, because it's still like for decades it was this discussion and this still existed, and even like to a degree this also existed in music, I think, before that. Like
sure. Yeah.
with was it Black Sabbath that was like
metal music, being satanistic and stuff.
To me, it's more of a documenting this discussion as it exists, taking the what if, sure, but showing that this has been this big point of discussion and of discourse for such a long time, and it's kind of led nowhere.
Well, that makes me wonder, because this is 1983, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mortal Kombat hasn't even hit the scene yet as far as violent video games and stuff, I don't think. Nearly 10-something years go by, and you have Existence, which almost sells the opposite idea, that it's the people who claim down that it's going to be, that this is going to make people more violent, that they're the violent ones. I wonder what the juxtaposition of his creation of these two things are, because they both kind of tackle the same idea from an opposite angle.
Mm-hmm. Interestingly enough, I'm not that big of a fan of Existence. To me, Videodrome is the more interesting exploration of it all, and it seems like to you it's the opposite.
Oh, well, fully the opposite. It's the least exciting body horror of any Cronenberg I've ever seen. It's got like 2 cool scenes, and that's it.
My 2 favorite Cronenberg would be this one and The Fly, and for different reasons. Like, to me, The Fly is the most, like, from a body horror perspective and from the special effects perspective, that's just a celebration of that, basically. Like, that's pure, everything's falling apart, flesh falling from the bones as he walks, whatever. That's awesome in that regard. And this body horror is just like sprinkles on top for me on Videodrome that I just like for all of the dissecting and all of the different layers in which it predicted stuff and the philosophy behind it and stuff like that. Like, it's 2 different kinds of enjoyment I have for these 2 movies.
That's very fair.
I guess we can jump into plot stuff a bit. I instantly have a note on the very opening of the movie. I love how it, from the very beginning, establishes TV as such a major thing in the life of these humans. Like the very opening shot starts on a TV program starting Civic TV, the one you take to bed with you. So first line instantly connects kind of sexuality and television. It basically serves as an alarm clock for the character. It gives him the daily updates or whatever. It's kind of the first human interaction this person has in the morning, a person talking to him through the screen. So from minute one, we instantly have this major role, the TV basically getting established as the first character itself.
I didn't even think about it like the going to bed with him being sexual. I just assumed it was like going to bed, like, because it's an alarm clock.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it is like a double meaning to that.
Maybe, yeah.
Then we get to the interview situation where we introduce the, I guess, love interest who says that we live in overstimulated times line, and we get introduced to Dr. Oblivion, which is such an amazing name.
Professor Oblivion.
Professor Oblivion. I'm sorry.
He went to school for that name,
Yeah. All the respect to that work he put in to be Professor Oblivion. Such a comic villain name. I love it.
It's ridiculous, honestly. What do you think of Ed Wood in this role in general? Ed Wood, fuck.
I was like, what?
James
Woods?
James Woods, thank you.
He's not a highlight to me, but I know a lot of people, he is the biggest or the one problem of the movie.
I fucking hate him so much, dude.
Yeah, I don't like him as a person at all. Like,
I don't like him as a person. I don't like him as an actor.
Yeah.
The only time I've ever accepted him as Hades is in in Hercules or whatever, and I'm like, good, you just stay in that one role ever, and that's it.
I generally rather don't see him in a movie because I tend to not like him that much. But at the same time, he totally worked for me in this role, and he doesn't destroy anything to me.
You're not supposed to like this character already, so it helps. It adds to it.
Yeah.
He's just a smarmy motherfucker in this movie, and it just
yeah, for sure.
Extra don't like him because of it. But I'm not gonna lie, that was part of my thing with this movie too. Is just he's got a lot of screen time.
Yeah, obviously.
He almost brings the pace of the film down for me. Just his acting style and the way he portrays the character is very slow. And the love interest is a weird one too for me. It's one of those like kind of disbelievable, like, I don't know.
Yeah, to me, I get what you mean. She's very one-dimensional.
It's very men writing women.
Yeah, I kind of give it a pass with this movie, which might be unfair, to be honest. But in my mind, I give it a pass because it kind of plays into the same idea of why I don't mind it being somewhat nihilistic with its messaging. Because to me, it kind of just tries to show this heightened reality of not really portraying reality, not really showing our world, not really how we behave towards content like this, but a very over-exaggerated version of it. And so in that sort of sense, I kind of accepted this character that's just like, super kinky and into all of that stuff, but kind of tries to build a barrier and hide behind that and not really portray that in the public eye, I guess. It made sense as a character in this universe, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. Not that it makes sense as a real person.
Yeah, I mean, I just thought the disbelievable part that she was trying to, fuck James Woods, but
yeah.
I'm just joking. I'm just joking. Something that bothered me is that snuff films clearly exist.
Mm-hmm.
You've never seen Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends, have you?
No.
That is a cartoon you do not know. The show Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends is a show about imaginary friends or whatever. And in it, there's a character named Duchess. And she's like very hoity-toity, fancy lady. People who are listening, if they're American, most likely know the character I'm talking about. But that's what I called the lady in this movie, was Duchess, the one who makes the Dionysus, I think it is, video or whatever that she tries to sell him.
Mm-hmm.
Like, she knows about snuff films, right? They clearly exist. It blows me away that that is a point of contention in this film that lasts so long, that he just disbelieves that these are real. Like you said earlier, he runs like a really niche station, right? That's like nobody else is really making this content, and he's pushing the limits of content or whatever. Why would he think somebody else is already making this? With like, it just doesn't make sense to me why he's not like, oh, this is fucking snuff films instantly.
I took it as that woman, the Duchess.
The Duchess, I don't know her name in the movie at all.
We'll just call her the Duchess for the rest of this. Like, she clearly works as a director in porn, I guess, in more extreme. So she, I think, even more than him, would be involved in underground filmmaking in this world. And as a child myself, I think I was introduced to the concept, to the word of the snuff film. Like, this idea of there's a movie where you would see an actual death is a snuff film. Like, that idea was introduced to me earlier than the actual knowledge that those also exist. Like, to me, that was more of a myth for a long time. Like, the word exists in concept, but yeah, those things basically don't exist, or don't exist in the public, or like it would just be maybe, I don't know, in a mafia kind of setting where, you know, to prove he filmed it also, or something like that would be where my mind would go to. So I kind of just took it as that, then, because before the internet, underground filming wasn't really spread at all compared to what we are living with now. To me, it wasn't at all unbelievable that even a person in that field would be like, yeah, snuff films for sure, yeah, as if those exist really.
I mean, Faces of Death came out almost like 5 years before this movie.
It's just a collection of death scenes.
It's literally, some of them are like reenacted and some of them are not. A lot of them are very much real death happening on screen. And yeah, it's just a collection of like everything from like car crashes to like people splitting monkey skulls open and eating the brains out, and like all kinds of shit. And the first one came out in like 78.
Yeah,
and yeah, they made one in 81. Like the third one was in 81. There's no way Cronenberg didn't see Faces of Death. It was a huge deal in America, so he had to have seen it. So I wonder if this has any influence from that existing.
Maybe.
That was a big controversy at the time, was people wondering, is it real or not? And for a long time, people thought all of it was real, every bit of it was real. And then it, came out that around like half of it is fake and half it's real. I wonder if that maybe is the idea of why Max Wren doesn't quite believe that it's snuff films.
He might have been part of the crowd that Faces of Death is all faked.
Fully, yeah.
I guess it's time to kind of return to Videodrome more directly. He gets the tape. They are in his apartment, he and she, and she wants to watch the tape that she finds laying there, which is Videodrome. And he explains with the words, "It's just torture and murder. It ain't exactly sex." And she just replies, "Who says that?" I just wanted to bring it up because it's another super early on mention to connect violence and sexual desire, I guess. Another visual thing that I love about it is the choice to make it all Videodrome itself, all in this orange color scheme.
And the clay wall.
Yeah, the clay wall, the floor, and on the sides, at least in the middle, it's like this black grate. It all just very much, at least out of my perspective, and I'm not sure how much that could be intended or not, but it all very much visually reminded me of, seeing images from Guantanamo Bay and stuff like that. Just the connection between the orange and the torture. I know that the Guantanamo Bay papers like dropped 2 decades later almost. So I don't know how public that was. I think like your prison system is all like orange clothing, right?
No.
Not? Okay.
No, that's movie shit, man. That is like a lot of corrections use orange. but it's specific to types of inmates. So like some places only violent inmates wear orange. Some places only like lowland inmates wear orange.
But still, in my mind, it worked as a kind of additional, almost prophetic thing of these basically in-universe spoken, leaked recordings of torture with the very clear association to this color orange, and with the actual Guantanamo files, showing people getting tortured, actual leaked footage of people getting tortured in orange clothing. It all very much rang home.
I just took it as not the clothing, but the background, the wall and all that stuff. I took it as it looked like skin. Like it's like flesh-like. And
yeah, but
I bet Cronenberg, would appreciate that kind of thing. Like, I like the wall because it looks like it's wet, like it looks like skin.
We get to the point in the story where Max finds out that this Professor Oblivion is connected to Videodrome in some way and wants to seek him out. I love the character of Oblivion. I have so many notes that span into different directions regarding to him. He's one of the reasons why I love this movie so much.
That's so weird. Please explain that.
Sure. I already pointed out how I love the Oblivion name. One of the things he says when he seeks him out is, I want to show him a new twist in video that he may not be aware of. So I love the way it plays with being oblivious of certain things, because, the world is oblivious of Professor Oblivion's actual state of health. The world thinks he is very much still around and kicking through the videos. But furthermore, there is one thing that kind of connects this to the last episode where we talked about the Omen movies.
Oh, shit.
In a weird way, I think this movie is a kind of reinvention of the Possession movie. Professor Oblivion's place is almost decorated and made up like a modern church that doesn't worship a god, but it worships video or television as a whole. You have the lower floor where homeless people come, and it almost looks like a soup kitchen type of setting and a homeless shelter or something, but instead of beds, you have those little cubicles with a television in each one. You have the upper floor with his daughter, where it's literally religious imagery on the back wall as if you're at the altar. And in a way, our protagonist gets possessed similarly to those religious possession movies, just through television, which we already kind of through that established as the replacement for religion or for God in that kind of setting. So that's very interesting to me, how it plays with that kind of visual idea, with that kind of story, and just puts it into a very different context.
It's an interesting idea. I feel like that's been, I couldn't give you like exact definitions or places, but I feel like this is an idea that's been tackled a couple times before. This idea of like the church of TV or the church of cinema or the church of the screen or whatever, I do like the way it's portrayed here. To explain why I don't like the Oblivion character kind of like jumps a little bit in the movie of why the movie falls apart for me, especially on this viewing.
Okay.
Once you start to discover that, like, not only is he dead, but that he has previously made all these tapes, and they are just, working out for the, you know what I mean? They, like, defy logical space-time, essentially, right?
Yeah.
The logic of the movie starts to fall apart with that, for me. And I think that's the idea, because we're following Max, and Max's like sanity is falling apart around the same time. And so the disconjointed nature of everything is just a reflection of his perspective of the disconjointed nature, of what he's experiencing.
Yeah, there's even a very specific moment in the film when it really tries to hammer home that point.
Yeah.
When he visits them there, or like the daughter there, and she shows him the last tape, I guess, he recorded.
Yeah.
and the first Videodrome that was recorded, therefore. And he starts addressing Max directly.
He does. Yeah, he addresses him directly. Yeah.
And in that moment, the audio quality of his recording changes. Like it stops being filtered through like video noise and like lower res quality of a recording and becomes a very clear, crisp audio. So it very much tries to make the point that this is a break in reality in that moment.
Yeah. Which, again, is fine. He also talks to him, I'm pretty sure, earlier on in the movie during the interview.
Not really.
But he still interacts within context of what's happening in the interview, right? He's still interacting in what would be a time.
Somewhat.
They ask him a question. He looks up. He goes, well, and then he answers it in a like a really roundabout way. But he still interacts with the interviewee. He doesn't, I don't think, interact with Max directly. I think he interacts with the interviewee, or the interviewer. Sorry. But what I mean by like it falls apart for me there is that I like the way the movie portrays the frailty of reality and whatever hallucinations or shit that Max is going through. But the idea that Oblivion has recorded these videos posthumously or whatever, is releasing them posthumously or whatever, puts too much validity on the fact that it could be real, that it isn't him hallucinating. I don't know. It just makes things start to fall apart for me. It makes the logic too fuzzy at that point.
Again, to me, it falls into the umbrella of heightened reality. We're not really watching a real world that could exist. And also, like specifically the interview in the beginning, yes, he does answer something. What he says could have really been said about almost any question regarding the future of television or the future of media, the future of, it's such a blank, not addressing anything directly that was asked of him answer. It's almost like a politician for TV media, an answer that you could give to a ton of questions. It's believable enough that within this universe that isn't trying to be fully real anyways, it doesn't bother me at all.
This is 81 or 86?
83.
It's interesting because up until 85, 86, in the United States, ABC, CBS, and NBC dominated television. The majority of their content was more wholesome stuff, game shows, the news, shit like that. That was the big thing, first off, was that the aim of television was that you'd see the wholesome family, they'd go through their shit, something would happen, they'd fix it by the end, everybody's happy.
Mm-hmm.
And in 85, Fox became a television channel, and it was very, very underground. And their first show that they put on was this show called Married with Children, in which the family fucking hated each other, and their problems were never solved by the end of the episode. It was always just like, I guess we have no fucking money now. And it was this big like shift in television of like this idea that you could have a deranged family on TV that reminded you more of yourself or something like that. So it's interesting that this movie almost predates the idea of a television channel that bases itself on what is more the degenerate side of people that that's not being tapped into, did actually come to fruition not only 3 years later.
Yeah. To me, a reason why Cronenberg probably could predict a lot of this is his direct relation to censoring.
Oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense.
He, as a horror director, as one of the horror directors ever, had to face more censoring complaints probably than many people in the industry. And what he said in an interview in 81, so whilst he was writing this and shortly before he was filming it, was that to him, the creation of video, of like the actual video cassette, to him, it kind of represented the possibility of freedom, a kind of democratization of media, where it's such a cheap medium, the accessibility of it is incredibly high, and it's going to be really difficult to completely censor it. That's also a kind of reason why, to me, the internet is an extension of this whole thing, because it is exactly that, what he described in 81 there, just to a even crazier degree, where even if you ban something in one country, a version of a movie gets banned in Germany, they can screen it still because they could just log into an Austrian network or whatever, and someone in Austria probably uploaded it where it isn't censored. To me, it kind of makes sense that he, as one of the first person, would see the possibilities of that and would see where the world is going with less and less options to censor stuff, with more and more democratization of possibilities of viewing things. And that kind of plays into that with, a smaller station trying to pick up, Fox in this situation, I guess, trying to pick up niches and just doing their own thing.
Yeah. A side note, really quick. We're talking very deeply here about, American television and stuff. This isn't even American. This doesn't even take place in America.
As a Canadian.
It doesn't even take place in America.
It's a fully Canadian production, which is another thing. He actually said in I think it was another interview, maybe an even older one, he said that him starting off making horror in 75, I think, with Shivers, was very much new ground in the Canadian film industry.
Yeah.
Genre as that didn't really exist in Canada, and he had to fight for everything at every step of the way.
Apparently, this movie, though not being American, apparently got its start in that he wanted to make it because he was inspired by when he was a kid, he would get pirate television from America, and he would get American TV signals in the middle of the night. And it was like this world where you could do different things on TV that you weren't doing here or something. I don't really understand. He just said it was different, and it made him want to explore that. And what if you could hide things in it?
Interesting. I'm going to continue on Professor Oblivion a bit.
Yeah.
Because the whole concept of him living on through tapes is fascinating to me for quite a few reasons. First of all, it again, to me, kind of plays into the way this predicted certain aspects of the internet, of social media in particular. We will at some point reach the situation where there's more accounts on social media of dead people than people that are still living.
I'm pretty sure we are already there, actually.
Maybe we are already there. Who knows?
Yeah, we might actually be already there. Yeah.
Through social media and through phones having cameras, everyone having cameras on them, on their body at all times, everyone being able to record anything at all times. We live in a state where the average person in the Western society has more recordings of them archived on the internet than the recordings probably exist of most aristocrats throughout history. And this idea of living on through recorded media as just a person in 83 is kind of insane to me. Furthermore, I love how it plays into this philosophy of the first and second death. I don't know if that rings a bell to you.
Like the theory of first and second death? Yeah, that you die once when you die, and then you die the second time when the last person to ever say your name in your context.
Yes, yeah. Exactly. I love how Dr. Oblivion or Professor Oblivion plays into that. His in the public's eye, he postpones his first death by simulating that he is still around, at least for now, and all of his efforts to record himself are kind of an effort to postpone the second death indefinitely by creating so many memories, so many archives of him that he will can never be fully forgotten, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Exploring that kind of idea through video recordings of themselves, through an archive of memories, and how that kind of became reality through social media is super fascinating to me.
Yeah, I like that. Oh no, I was say the only thing that I think that wasn't predicted with that is the oversaturation.
Once we reach a point where everyone has this kind of archive.
Not even just that, but like, speak of the word archive, the internet archive exists, right? Because, we were always told growing up, like, everything you put online, it's there permanently, forever. It's always there. And every person over the age of 25 knows that that's really not actually that true. That there's a lot of fucking shit that was on the internet that is just absolutely unfindable now.
Yeah.
Fully unfindable. We're getting to the point on the internet where everybody has a media presence to some degree. You could put yourself online and still be lost because there are so many people that you will just never even be seen, even though you're on the internet, which I don't think was quite predicted with this.
In a social media metaphor, he's almost the first online celebrity, I guess, in this universe,
Yes.
just through video. If everyone in this universe at a certain point had this kind of archive of videos of themselves, then it wouldn't be something special anymore. Then it wouldn't, everyone wouldn't stand out again. For sure. There's one more note that I have on this whole first and second death thing. It comes back in the very end when through the television screen, she talks again to him and she says the line, "I have learned a lot since I last saw you. I learned that death is not the end." This whole narrative of forging the new flesh also plays into that. Let your old body die and come to me. It kind of works both in the to death idea and also in the religious soul going to heaven kind of idea of a possession movie, I guess. The physical body's death isn't the end in a religious sense either. And we already have that connection of the religion of TV and how this character, this character's soul basically lives on through the video recordings he made of himself, through the TV, through religion, in that sense.
I mean, the ending itself, is probably, that's what he's doing. He's initiating that lack of ever having a second death by initiating his first death at that moment and immortalizing it in television. He's perpetuating that second death for a long time. Fun fact, did you know that was James Wood's idea?
The ending?
Yeah, they filmed 3 different endings for this movie. And the third one was James Wood's idea. He convinced them to film this. And Cronenberg liked it so much that he made it the actual ending of the film.
Awesome.
I don't know how Cronenberg's ending actually was, like his written ending.
As far as I know, they had real crunch time. Like the way funding in Canada works, they get like cut off at the new year, and they were getting close to that.
Because this was a state-funded film, actually, right?
Yeah. So they actually had to start shooting before he had finished writing the end of this movie. So he had several ideas of how it could go, and overall the plot was there, just the details he hadn't figured out yet. So yeah, they were struggling to make a decision of how it should end. So that makes sense that people chimed in and gave like their ideas. I also have like a little trivia on the actual filming of the end. For the television kind of exploding and shooting out the organs, they got sheep's guts from a nearby slaughterhouse.
Ugh.
They had kind of a problem where they planned to shoot that scene earlier than they did. So they already got the sheep's gut. And when they actually got around to shooting it, a full week has passed. So the sheep's guts were already obviously decaying and smelling awfully. They are blasting the whole room with those sheep guts. And what ended up happening was that the first take, parts of it landed on the lens and the shot just was unusable. They had to clean up the entire set, collect the decaying, stinking sheep guts again, and shoot it all a second time, which must have been awful. And I believe that was the last thing they shot on the movie. So they all just wanted to go home. It was shortly before Christmas, and now everything was just stinky and they had to do it all over again.
I feel like anytime you hear about a special effect that used like real viscera, like real meat in some way, that's almost always the story. Is like it sat in the sun for like 6 hours before we shot. It was like, fucking 38 degrees, and everything was hot and stinky, and like I feel like that's almost always the story when you hear that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Even Alien had that issue with the eggs or whatever, because they used like chicken breasts in the eggs, and it was really
Oh.
really disgusting smelling. And like same with Exorcist and the pea soup, and they kept getting clogged in the thing when she'd vomit, and because it was going bad in the fucking tubes. Yeah, man, don't use real food. Don't use organic shit. That's a terrible idea.
My roommate, who's producing music, recognized something about the soundtrack. It's almost exclusively composed using a single droning sound. His educated guess was that it's a string instrument, maybe like a cello that is distorted. And almost like a big parts of the soundtrack are just composed using this one sound pitched up and down to create the notes. And from a thematic standpoint, that is super interesting to me because, Videodrome, the lore idea behind it is that it just uses the violent image to get you susceptible to it, but then there is this underlying signal that's really influencing it, what it's really about. And you could make the point that the movie here, you also are mostly occupied with the imagery, what's going on screen, and the soundtrack is very much just complementary. You don't pay attention to it as much, but it is this constant signal that's stimulating your senses, quite literally, that's just underneath it all and kind of hidden under the intense imagery. So that's super cool from a philosophy perspective of how the soundtrack was composed.
I noticed it in one or two parts that it was like there's that hum almost like the
Yeah.
through like the entire thing, right? It doesn't shift.
Yeah.
Other notes shift to create, the melody, but that one is still going, right?
Yeah, it like sometimes the other notes are also just that hum pitched up and down.
Yeah, the one I remember the most is like he puts the gun in his stomach. That whole scene, I noticed that during that scene is that was going. I took that as it's the hum of a television, because at the time you would have been using cathode ray TVs. You wouldn't have.
That also makes sense.
And they had that specific hum that happened every time you turn them on. They had that, and you could hear the TV run. If you had the TV on mute, you could still kind of hear it run. So I just assumed it was like, if you would, the video drone of a television.
That's also nice. Yeah, could be both. Then my final thing is just on the practical effects, because despite, as I already pointed out, The Fly being, for example, way more impressive with like the amount and the crazy extent to which it uses those practical effects, I still love, in particular, the TV set practical effects, where it kind of has pumping veins and flexes its muscles, I guess.
I like the living cassette. I like that one.
Yeah, that one too. For the TV set, I actually found in an behind-the-scenes documentary shot and released in 2004, I believe, Videodrome Forging the New Flesh. They showed some insight on the TV set because it was the most elaborate prop that they built. Obviously, like they made it with pockets that would fill with air and tubes would lead to it and they could pump it up and deflate it again. For controlling that, however, one of the technicians had the idea of using their synthesizer keyboard, a super early synthesizer keyboard. We're talking like first evolution stage basically of the technology, and hooking it up to valves that pump in the air and deflate it. So they basically controlled the TV set and which part would inflate and deflate at which times by playing a piano, which is
That's cool though. That's a cool way to do that.
Yeah, which is a super interesting image. I'm gonna put, I guess, imagery maybe in the description and on the YouTube video. But I guess that's it on Videodrome.
And now we go from a movie about TV possession to TV self-expression with I Saw the TV Glow.
I Saw the TV Glow follows Owen from the age of 13 He makes friends with Maddie, and together they obsess about a fantasy teen TV show called The Pink Opaque. Through that safe space they and the show create for each other, they explore their gender boundaries, which Owen can't really do at home, being raised in a conservative household. With the show getting cancelled and Maddie's disappearance, Owen stumbles kind of directionless through life, never finding the courage or support to come out as the trans woman that he is implied to be. Just a little disclaimer up front. We're obviously discussing this as two cis males. We're gonna try to not misgender anyone here. We think we're coming at this with the right intentions, but a lot of this is kept vague to a degree. And even though we're trying to, we will for sure get some of the vocabulary wrong. So I'm gonna give my side of what I think happens gender-wise up front, just to get things clear. To me, Owen has suppressed gender dysphoria they never get over. And on the other hand, Maddie, initially established as a perceived female-gendered woman, after the disappearance and reappearance, dresses more masculine, stops using that name. We never get a new name they use or what exact gender they identify at that point. So for the most part, I'm just going to refer to them as them. Devyn, what's your experience with I Saw the TV Glow?
Oh man, I really hope my dear close friend does not listen to this episode. He loves this movie so much. I was introduced through this a long time ago through trailers. I really wanted to see it. I had gotten really hyped for it. I had a friend who was really hyped for it. They saw it. They saw it again. They saw it again. It's a mutual friend of ours. They saw it again. They saw it again. They have seen it, I think, a dozen times.
I think more like 20 at this point.
Yeah, it's just insane. You know, I was right there wanting to see it when they wanted to see it. I had the same hype that they did for different origins, which I'm going to get into that a lot. I think I'm going to get into separate origins a lot. And they loved it. I wish I loved this movie. Man, I really wanted to love this movie. I like the front half of this movie. I'm not as into the back half of this movie. But there's a lot that this movie tries to do or reflects on that I really appreciate and I really love.
Mhm.
I just wish I enjoyed it more as a film.
Yeah, it's interesting that you already mentioned like the enjoying the first half more, because on a pacing sense, I also think that the first half is the stronger edited, stronger paced half. I think like it turns up the crank a lot in like the middle part, and then kind of can't keep that sort of pacing up. I'm not saying that it even really tries to. I just think from an experience side, I also felt like the second half couldn't quite keep being as entertaining or like as engaging is the better word to put it.
As soon as the second half kind of kicks its gear and you go, oh, okay, you realize there's 10 minutes left in the film and you go, oh, all right. So I'll start off real quick what I was saying about origins. This movie is clearly expressing a lot of feelings, which we will get into. It is expressing those feelings through inspiration. This movie is dripping with inspiration. It's dripping with nostalgia. It is a love letter and an homage to the creator's childhood through the screen. There are so many bits and pieces of this movie that are quite literally taken from other things
Mhm.
in a very respectful, artistic, very good way.
Mhm.
For me, the thing that really drove me to this film was that the two biggest inspirations in the cinema, not thematics, the
Cinematic language.
yeah, thank you, yeah, is a television show called The Adventures of Pete and Pete, and another television show called Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
I felt the Buffy in there. I wasn't aware of the other one, but yeah, I could feel Buffy the Vampire Slayer in this, yeah.
Our mutual friend is a huge Buffy fan. That is where they connected, I think, initially on this. You know, I think for me, it's Pete and Pete. Pete and Pete was a huge part of my childhood. absolutely shifted and changed the way I looked at what TV could be and what film could be. I rewatch it almost every other year. I've shown it to people in our group before during movie nights and stuff.
Mhm.
It's a weird show. So I really like that about this. There's a lot of fun things taken from that in this movie. The actors in that show are actually in this movie, even.
Mm.
This is where I felt like my root of this movie is, and that's where a lot of the roots of this movie began,
Mhm.
are those two TV shows. And I think that's important because this movie's a lot about 90s television, really. You do not have the same connection to American 90s television.
I don't. I have like some connection to Buffy. My cousin was really into Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and I watched it sometimes with him. So I have some connection, and I picked up on some of that for sure. But yeah, I don't have the big personal relationship with it. But I am aware that Buffy the Vampire Slayer, in particular, was a big cultural landmark, I guess, in LGBTQ culture. Like, I know that a lot of people discovered their own sexuality through watching Buffy in TV.
I never did it at all, actually. I've only seen, I think, one episode of Buffy my entire life.
Mm.
So, do you, besides Buffy, do you feel any influence from 90s nostalgia TV in this?
Yeah, as I said, my experience with 90s TV is limited to a few of those really big influential things that just stayed along for long enough that I came around to it. You know, obviously Simpsons already was a big thing in the 90s, and I obviously experienced that growing up because it's still a big thing now, stuff like that.
Mhm.
But not really the things you would directly consider 90s television. Why do you ask? Is there a specific thing that you're getting at?
I mean, everything.
Okay.
Everything in this movie. The title font is almost directly the exact title font from a television show called The Secret World of Alex Mack. The credits font is directly the font from Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Mm-hmm.
Though a lot of the movie takes place like on a football field.
Yeah.
The director has they've angled the camera so that the lines almost always line up a certain way when you see the characters walking on the field.
Mm-hmm.
And that exactly mimics how the first episode of Pete and Pete is filmed.
Okay.
Like literally the whole first episode. The second episode of Pete and Pete is quite literally about the characters falling for this ice cream man. The head that the Frosty guy uses, he's like a mascot character, is directly the same one that they're using in this movie. They've just like added stuff to it or something. I'm fairly certain the voice actor is the same. And that's like the second episode of Pete and Pete. It's like literally there are so many things in this movie that are direct homages to scenes of other TV shows.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost mind-boggling how much of it is just lifted straight out of other stuff, which is, I think, a really great homage. Either way, I ask that because it's interesting to see this without any of that.
Mm-hmm.
So you're just seeing this movie for what the movie is and nothing else.
Kind of. Like, despite not having that childhood relationship to it, or like going back and watching Buffy or whatever, one of the first things going into this movie, watching it the first time, was having that kind of feeling, oh, I already know that this tonality kind of represents this kind of filmmaking, this kind of era of filmmaking. I wasn't oblivious to it. I just didn't pick up on a lot of specific things, just more a general vibe of the 90s television.
Well, that's something I really wish I could have explored with him before we did this, because I don't know any of those connections that this movie has to Buffy other than like the monster of the week-ism of the pink opaque show itself. You know, Pete and Pete isn't a monster of the week show. It's not. It's a show just about people living their life and doing weird shit, like trying to find the ice cream man or trying to make summer last longer. Stupid shit. So I don't know what thematically in this movie really reflects that. All I can see is the cinematography and the scenes of the things of other shit.
Yeah, that's still interesting to me because when I talk to them and even talk to quite a few other people about this movie, no one really brought up specific homages or anything. Even just what you already said there more enlightened this part of the film to me, which is interesting.
I think I'm like one of the only of 3 people that are in that common friend group that know of the show.
Okay.
What I said earlier, this movie uses these inspirations to tell a bigger story.
Mhm.
And what I think's really interesting is how somebody can take something like Pete and Pete, watch it, say, I want to homage this. I want to use this imagery. I want to grow through this imagery or express myself through this imagery somehow. They can use transition or that point of their life to be that storytelling point for this, right?
Mhm.
Or how they experienced this media reflected their feelings about their transition or about their inner self, right? That's their perspective of how they experienced Pete and Pete, right?
Yeah.
Is so vastly different to how I experienced Pete and Pete, right? That
Mhm.
when I watched this, if somebody wouldn't have told me that that's the theme that's being presented in this movie, I wouldn't have picked it up because I didn't experience Pete and Pete in that way. And the way that they portray this film and reflect on it and look back on it isn't the way I look back on Pete and Pete. There's a couple points throughout in the movie, even when to jump a little ahead, when he watches it again and sees that it's more childish than he remembers, right?
Yeah.
That's not how I fucking feel about Pete and Pete. Every time I watched, I'm like, fuck, this show's even more adult than it ever led on being. It's conflicting in that sense of it's interesting to see how different their perspective of that is and that experience.
It's interesting that you bring up the scene where he rewatches it, because I don't even think the scene is meant as a completely neutral looking at this as an adult.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how it really is. I think there's also this additional layer of early on the series to these two represent kind of the safe space to have trans thoughts, to live out those kind of thoughts. And at this point where they rewatch it, I think the idea is also that in that point of their life, they have suppressed those kind of thoughts to such a degree that visually speaking, the series also lost some of the magic, because that magic of the show represents the trans thoughts that are so suppressed now that they can't be even visually accessible, you know?
Yeah, that's where the trans aspect of the film, I think, is really interesting on perception and origin, because like I said, I didn't pick up that on that at all.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a cis male, right? But I've had my struggles with identity in my life.
Mm-hmm.
I think I understand non-binary people more than very masculine people sometimes, if that makes a lot
Yeah.
of sense.
Yeah.
And the line specifically in the movie where, she says, I like girls, you know that? And he goes, that's okay. He's like, I like TV shows.
Yeah.
That really hit me in a particular way. And I thought the character was more heading toward androgyny. So it was my perception from my origin was much different while watching this, and I didn't pick up what they were selling. You know what I mean? I didn't
Mm-hmm.
get it at first. I didn't really get it in the same way.
Did you pick up on all the little things in which it's there in color?
Explain. What do you mean they're in color?
From like the very beginning, the opening shot is basically a blue shot with pink writing, pink lettering on top with the opening credits. You have the scene in the gym where Owen, as a little kid, still they do the whole lifting up a blanket, catching air underneath, and creating a temporary tent kind of thing.
I saw that and I was like, I don't know the trans flag colors by heart.
Oh, okay.
I was like, I think that's the trans flag colors.
Only on the inside, interestingly enough, it's the trans flag colors.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's a beautiful analogy for it to only. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's a sad analogy, actually, but it's a beautifully done analogy.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing, though, is that before I saw this movie, that was one thing I was actually told up front many times, was that this movie is a representation of how this person feels about transitioning and realizing you're trans. That was the big part, was that I was told that it's a lot about realizing you're trans. I think the director in an interview talks about how this movie is supposed to reflect what they called, I think they called it the eggshell breaking moment, or they called it the aha moment. I don't remember, but it's the moment that you realize that you are not in the right body and you figured out, I need to be this other thing or whatever. I am this other thing, I think, the way they put it. So that's something I learned before I actually saw it. So I feel like I was almost searching for that moment in the movie. I never saw that moment. And I think that's because I've never had that moment. And I think that that is directly speaking to trans people. And it's one of those, if you know, kind of things that I just will not be able to understand because I have not had that moment. And that's frustrating film wise to watch for somebody who hasn't had that moment. And I'm obviously having a hard time finding it. But I think it's a beautiful thing for people who have. It's got to be a great movie then for that aspect, for people who have had that moment. I bet it's fucking amazing.
It's interesting that the director, that they talk about that it is about that moment. To me, it felt almost like it's a film trying to constantly approach that moment and never quite reaching it. Like almost being at a hand length of a distance to that moment and never fully accepting it or fully like, breaking out of the shell. In like the middle of the movie, he goes through a hallway with tinted windows to the left and to the right. And to the left, it's pink windows, and to the right, it's cyan light blue windows.
I mean, that's kind of what I mean when I talk a little bit about like the I understand non-binary people more sometimes, right? Because I forget that blue and pink mean anything with gender. That doesn't mean anything to me. They're just colors. I don't think of them as masculine. I have a hard time remembering anything I do as masculine or feminine. It's just things.
So you're like so disassociated with the idea of gender almost that you kind of forget about the representations of it.
100%. That's a really good way to put it, honestly, sometimes.
I can name a few more things that like are in relation to that. What that friend of ours pointed out to me was that on the way to that hallway, they go through like a hallway where there's a bunch of posters to the left and to the right with motivational quotes. And they believe that on the right-hand side where the blue shows up are all the super masculine quotes and like motivational speech things. And on the left, it's more the feminine side. So on the right-hand side, we literally have the same quote, or one of the quotes that also is on the walls that we discussed in Love Lies Bleeding. Pain is weakness leaving the body, is on the right-hand side where the blue windows show up. There is also more like direct plot points where the whole coloring plays into it. So there's the scene Maddie and Owen sit on the stands and they talk about the pink opaque again, and Owen brings up the idea that he would like to come over and watch it basically in the moment it airs again with Maddie. That's the whole scene you already brought up with I like TV shows. In that moment, it's also, I think, the first time that Owen wears pink. He wears a pink sweatshirt. I guess it's implied in that scene that Maddie also represents a kind of safe space for Owen to express his gender the way, or like their gender, the way they feel about it, really. But yeah, it works a lot with the coloring, and even, as I pointed out, even the color grading and the way scenes are lit are often with blue and pink.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I just thought it was like lighting choices. Thinking now that of it just being as blue and pink lighting, it makes a lot more sense, the symbology behind it. In the moment of watching it, I was just like, oh yeah, blue pink lighting, like purple lighting, that's like the thing right now. That makes sense.
Yeah, because it feels...
Because it is kind of the thing right now.
Yeah, I particularly love it here because it absolutely has additional layers to it. It's not just a stylistic choice, it also makes thematic sense.
Man, I'm gonna have to rewatch it because I want to really like this movie.
It helped me a lot. Like speaking to that common friend of ours, getting to think about the scenes again and getting some additional, context and some more clues to what it is really helped me to focus on particularly the ideas of safe space. I was aware of the imagery and I was aware of the themes and the colors all playing into this transitional theme, but particularly thinking of the idea of safe space and how their relationship, how the TV show, how TV as a general kind of represent that safe space, and even the tent to an extent, being inside the tent. They, I think, for the first time think about this. It's the first time the colors in relation to the character come up. All of those represent safe spaces, basically. And his home absolutely isn't one. And therefore, it kind of leads to this suppression, I think.
Did I miss his father having lines?
Maybe only one, but one that I can think of right now, and that very much plays into that. They are driving home from somewhere. Owen's laying on the lap of the mother, and they ask for if they can stay up tonight and watch.
Oh, a sleepover or something. Oh, yeah, that's right.
And then the dad interrupts and is like, isn't that a show for girls? So that's, I think, the one line we get. And yeah, it's painting a clear picture.
There's a lot of buzz about the father actor. So I was just
really?
I felt like it was...
It's such a small role.
That's why I was like, it's fucking crazy that they make a big deal out of who plays the dad.
I mean, he played it well, but it's a really small role. I'm surprised that it has buzz.
You know who plays the dad, right?
Not off the top of my head now.
Fred Durst, the lead singer of Limp Bizkit.
Oh, interesting.
Very interesting, yeah. Again, though, popular in the 90s and in the early 2000s, You know what I mean? That's of that time. And then there's a Buffy the Vampire Slayer character is in the movie. The two original characters from Pete and Pete are in the movie, like I said. The director has, like, reasons that they've said that those characters represent. Before I read any of that, kind of felt like they were either just like nostalgia grabs, or the director really just wanted to work with the people that like they grew up with. That's really what I thought it was, like deep down inside. I saw some like backstage photos of them, like the director taking pictures with each one of those people, and they are so happy, smiling ear to ear every time they're with one of those people. And I'm like, they just wanted to fucking meet Danny Tamborelli. That's all this was. They just wanted to meet fucking, they just like, and I get it. That's awesome. But like literally the Pete and Pete characters, right? They just appear. They don't ever say anything. They just are standing there for like a few seconds, and then the scene cuts and they don't bring them up again. And the director said that they represent like aging in some way. And I'm like, that's cool, but I feel like you just really wanted them on set.
I mean, it can always be both, You can have a narrative reason and additional personal reasons to do something.
Yeah. But I feel like that was the thing with Fred Durst, is I think that they just really wanted to meet Fred Durst. So I want to bring up real quick, though, we've reflected a lot on things that we have really no business making any real solid discussions on, really, that we have no real basis. But what we can talk about that is the actual plot. If you just think about the plot and the flow of the film.
Before we go there, I would still like to add on the thing. I guess my main thing is I wanted to add on to that you're absolutely right. It's not our experience. And I'm not trying to make any definitive statements here as to intentions or the overall meaning of it all. I still think it's interesting and important for people to watch media like this and also discuss it despite not having the experiences on their own, if only for confronting yourself with those type of experiences, if only for having more sympathy and more understanding for the struggles of those type of experiences, you know? So I still think it's an interesting insight in that sort of way.
Very, very true.
I guess I have one final point, that how something in the movie came across to me as an outsider looking in, basically. In the opening credits that I already mentioned, are like very bluish in color scheme and the pink writing over it. We see a street there with children crayon drawings. I believe it's even like the ghost figures that come up later in the pink opaque itself. But in particular, it's the crayon drawings that I wanted to point out. That's the exact street with, again, crayon drawings return very late into the movie, with the crayon drawing then in big lettering says, "There is still time." And to me, that really hit a point where it must be so hard and harder and harder as your life goes on to make that type of decision to transition, because of the time you already invested kind of into that life and the life you built yourself up until that point, and how there's such a big change in your life could impact all of those things. I don't like how that sounds, but I kind of had to think of the idea of, the sunk cost fallacy, which, obviously gets almost always brought up in the context of gambling. But, by definition, the sunk cost fallacy is more the idea of you already invested so much into something that it's hard to give up a certain pattern of doing things. And that investing into something can also represent just time. And the time they invested into that sort of life makes it more difficult over time to make a big change in your behavior. And that was really interesting to me. Just like that, there is still time was such a powerful imagery to me.
I think that's the aha moment, or I really think the whole film is really the aha moment. I almost feel like the movie is supposed to be, here's the aha moment and here's what happens, but somebody doesn't take it.
Maybe, yeah. We can move on to more a bit of the plot stuff. I don't even think it's that useful to break down the plot on a too literal level, or like try to understand what's completely going on. I don't believe there is one clear answer, but yeah, we can still go into it and go over it for a bit.
Okay. Basically what I think we have, right, is we have a show or a movie that without all these themes, without all these deeper meanings and beliefs behind them, we have a monster of a week episode. Basically, your character finds a TV show, fast forward to the future, turns out this person is like, that TV show is real and we got to go fight the thing and we got to go deal with it. There is one of the episodes that they show a quick snippet of Pink Opaque.
Mm-hmm.
The like plot of the episode is literally it's like season 3 episode 6 or something like that, is literally the same exact plot snippet for season 3 episode 6 of Buffy. I do know that little factoid. But so, fast forward to the future, it's like, oh, it's a real life thing or whatever. That's very Buffy the Vampire Slayer. The Pete and Pete aspect for me is that the character then goes, that's crazy, I'm not doing that. And then just fucking doesn't do it. Just doesn't go through with like finding the monster. He just fucks off, right? That's very Pete and Pete. I like that in a lot of ways. I like the way that this movie structures itself. It feels like it should have been a show, honestly. But like the ending without all these deeper thematic meanings fucking sucks, man. As just like an ending to the film, I really hate it. I really hate the end of this movie.
Like the getting buried, or like that there is actually a grave dug out, but
That they don't go find the fucking Mr. Melancholy. They don't like, it's real, it's a thing you can do, but they don't do it. That he just gets old and just sad. It just sucks. I don't know. I get it. Now more based in themes. I just, at the time of watching,
without that context.
well, yeah, and just like, again, the inspiration thematics that they're using, I wish were utilized better. She has the Pete and Pete characters on set, not barely using them for anything good that I cared about. Just they're there. They're just there. That's it. They're just there. The fuck, man? What? Give them a line.
I guess that's again kind of representative of the differences in how we watch movies, the two of us, because even when it is media and referenced material that I am aware and attached to, I kind of like when it's super small little hidden things relating to it, just to include them, to give them kind of like a shout out. My problem would be if there was a scene and it's the Pete and Pete characters and they are all of a sudden like doing a very Pete and Pete kind of thing, and I don't have the context as someone who has never seen that show.
You're not distracted by it.
I'm not distracted by it, exactly. And including them still shouts them out in a way like Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, for example, has a little cameo of the real Hunter S. Thompson. And that doesn't distract you if you don't get it. If you get it, it's a cool little thing. Oh, there he really is. You know?
Okay. I guess a better example. I mentioned earlier that the scenes on the football field are filmed very much exactly like scenes that Pete and Pete are filmed. Some of the dialogue is filmed very much the way the dialogue back and forths in Pete and Pete. And toward the end of the movie, he at one point speaks to the camera, right?
Mm-hmm. I think there's a few, but yeah.
In the way that, like, you can tell one cheese from another cheese, right? And it's very nuanced. Pete and Pete had only two characters looked at the camera and spoke. And they were kids, and they kind of, probably had the same coach or whatever. Either way, they kind of had the same cadence in the way that they narrated.
Mm-hmm.
And it was very off on purpose. The director of the TV shows talked about how people had really off cadences to give you an otherworldly effect.
Okay, yeah.
And he nails the exact cadence that they would narrate with when he narrates at the screen.
That's cool.
It's so fucking perfect that it just makes me wish more of the movie was filmed like it. And even in those scenes where it's filmed like it, because the movie's using this really dark colors and like pink and blue lights and stuff, Pete and Pete isn't like that. Pete and Pete is very daylight. It's very bright colors and stuff. And even in the episodes that are night, there's a lot of lighting in it. And I know that this is like this director saying, hey, when I was watching Pete and Pete, these are the things I was going through. And these are the things I attach to the memories of these TV shows. And that's why I've combined them, right?
Mm-hmm.
My interpretation of these TV shows are different. And so it's weird for me to watch it in dark lighting. It's almost like somebody is recreating a thing you love, but just off, just a little off. And it's cool, but I just wish there was more of that specifically, or just more, almost like I know that this director has the ability to recreate the amazing thing that is Pete and Pete. I can see that they can do it. They know how to do it. They've figured out how to remake this. Why didn't they just make more Pete and Pete, damn it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because they had their own story to tell, of course.
Yeah,
they had their
exactly.
own thing to express. Of course, but you know what I mean.
Like the original still exists. It doesn't
I
need
know.
to. Like
that's actually the other thing. You remember I mentioned like the whole like he goes back and rewatches it and he's like, it's not as good. And I was like, fuck you, Pete and Pete is still just as good, right? The other difference is that Pete and Pete isn't streaming. In fact, Pete and Pete is notoriously hard to find. The season 2 DVD goes for $300. Like, it is incredibly difficult to get a hold of to watch. So it's even more infuriating.
Mm-hmm. I can see that struggle just from like, this fandom perspective. It makes
Pure fandom.
it makes sense.
But this movie was born out of fandom. So that's kind of why I am
which is why I
more embracing it than I would normally.
I know that's kind of how your brain just thinks about stuff.
Yeah.
To me, it's just
more icing on a cake.
Yeah, it's icing on the cake, but also I don't think I would have a problem if I'm confronted with a fandom that I'm a part of, and it's a very different part of the fandom, and they have a very different view of the thing. Like, if it's both stemming from love for the thing, I think it would be super entertaining to see a different side, to experience this perspective of, oh, there's these other people that also love the same property that I grew up with, that I associate certain memories with, but they have a very different reason for it. So let's explore why. To me, it would be, I don't see that as a negative, but I think that's just the difference in how we experience media.
Very well put. If this director's anchor point in this film, I think it's, hey, this is what I was feeling when I experienced these TV shows, and that's why they're connected to me, right?
Mhm.
That's what I've got to imagine is a big thing here for them. If they just didn't even have that anchor point, but they wanted to portray this type of nostalgia in these darker ways cinematically still, right?
Mhm.
I would just be like, this sucked.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean? Like, I would have been like, man, I didn't like that. I didn't like the way they did any of that, really. But the anchor points of it being, hey, this is a really meaningful thing and there's real reason behind all this, really creates a cohesion in the art that matters. Sometimes art needs that. Not all art is just pretty to the eye. Some art is pretty to the mind and the soul.
For sure.
And that's part of that. But yes, I mean, I don't know. I don't have anything else on that, actually.
No, it was beautiful.
Do you have any plot points or anything about this movie that really got you, or you didn't like, or you loved, or?
Not really the big plot points. I think the one thing I still want to get to are the two actual Videodrome references.
Oh yeah, because that's something I was going to mention. Is I don't feel like these movies are fucking connected at all. I feel like we did a terrible job of pairing these films.
I think we had way better connected movies, but I think there are two actual visual homages to Videodrome.
We should just watched an hour of Buffy and an hour of Pete and Pete.
Yeah. To a degree, something we didn't mention earlier, but Videodrome definitely also plays with the imagery of sex. You know, the way the protagonist loses the gun inside his stomach. You know, that's a representative of like a fucked up image reversion of something vaginal. The gun that shoots him in the end, definitely, like when it gets the skin texture and the way we look at it, is definitely like representative of a cum shot of a cock.
I'm sorry, you're just always so proper when you speak, and then out of nowhere, the cum shot of a cock. I expected like a man's ejaculate or something much more. Just the cum shot of a cock.
Yeah.
God damn.
Yeah. Sometimes my brain just goes to the first vocabulary that it comes to mind.
It just was funny.
But what I'm getting at is that those are not the things that I particularly pick up on when I watch Videodrome. But if you are a person who has a more direct relationship to gender dysphoria, I would assume that watching Videodrome might be a very different experience. And those are the things that you pick up on more directly and think about deeper. And there might be additional layers that, I didn't look into. There are what I believe are visual homages from TV Glow to Videodrome. You have the scene of Owen crawling into the television set whilst the father tries to pull him out. What I think that scene actually represents here on a more literal plot side I think the pink opaque almost represents cross-dressing for Owen at that point, and the father might have caught Owen cross-dressing and kind of goes rough on him due to that in that scene on a more literal level. And Owen just tries to hold on and tries to crawl into the TV set, into the pink opaque, which represents those trance thoughts. The imagery really, color-wise, just in a more modern digital version, is like the scene when the protagonist in Videodrome crawls into the TV set or sticks the head in. And by the end of the movie, like really before the last scene, Owen sits there in the toilet and he rips his stomach open in a similar way to the gun, to the vaginal imagery in Videodrome. And even TV glow comes out of it, so the trans thoughts come out of it. But again, it's a digital representation of the same kind of effect that Videodrome did practically.
And here I thought that was an homage to the Teletubbies.
It's kind of in between Teletubbies and the Videodrome prosthetic. Yeah, you're right. Those are the vague connections that I did pick up on. Just to clarify, we made that pairing before either of us had seen TV Glow, and we assumed a few things to get to a pairing. So I also expected more of a connection, but I definitely think it is there, and people have made like comparisons between the two for sure.
Mm-hmm. It's a movie that's about TV shows in a big way. I think it's great that we paired it with a film. Obviously, it's what we do. But I think people, viewers that listen to this that haven't seen it or want to rewatch it, I think they should really watch it with episodes of Pete and Pete and Buffy and really get the full experience. I think that's its real pairing out there.
Mm-hmm.
I will say this, though. I really hated the music.
Oh, interesting.
Ah, man, I feel really bad about it. I was really excited because I was hoping the music would be. That's a big thing with Pete and Pete is the music is very important to the show. The dude who wrote it and directed it was in a band, and like his band does the opening, and they often had like you heard of like REM? Do you know what REM is? The lead singer of REM is a character for a while. Steve Buscemi was on it. There's a lot of fucking characters in this in Pete and Pete. It's so weird how many characters are in Pete and Pete. Iggy Pop is in it, but like just music and music characters are a huge deal in it, and they had a lot of really interesting alternative music. And this movie had music that I absolutely fucking hated. God, I didn't like it. Oh,
I totally forgot about it up until now. But there is some actual deeper meaning behind the band that plays there. Like there is additional layers as to why it's those songs, why it's those singers singing it. Like there is additional stuff to dig into there. I forgot what it exactly was, but yeah.
There's people that want to heal or make art for themselves, and this is the medium they make art in. Basically, people that make movies for the audience versus people that make movies for themselves. There's nothing wrong with either thing, personally, and I think a lot of artists do both. I think this movie was made very much for the director. You know, I think probably the music is deeply connected to the director. The shows are obviously deeply connected. I just hated the songs.
I do agree that the director probably made it for themselves also, but I don't think that's like the sole thing. I know that basically an entire subculture of people is connecting to the, you know, there is definitely a huge portion of people that will have very personal feelings relating to the story, and it's made for all of them as well. I don't think they filmed it and were like, yeah, this is just for me. No one's gonna understand this.
No, I don't think it was as much like that. I think it's more like I am making this for me because this is how I feel and this is how I felt, and I know others felt like this too.
That's a perfect way to put it. Yeah.
But I do think for the first promise is this is their expression of feeling through art.
In the next appointment, we're gonna make another special pairing without a current movie, but instead with a common style of filmmaking. We are going back to the 80s with puppeteering and practical effects in family movies.
Your first prescription is the 1982 dark fantasy epic The Dark Crystal. The film was co-directed by Frank Oz and Jim Henson, and the film takes place on the planet Thra and follows two creatures on their quest to save the Dark Crystal from the evil race of Skeksis. Entirely made with puppets, the film was initially met with low to mixed reviews, but has since become a cult classic, leading to an Emmy Award-winning prequel series.
The second film on your prescription is the 1984 German cult classic The NeverEnding Story. It's an adaptation of the fantasy novel by the same name in a meta-layered story including a huge variety of practical effects and filmmaking techniques. It's considered one of the biggest milestones in German film history to this day and directed by Wolfgang Petersen.
If you don't want to get spoiled for either of these movies, make sure to check them out by the next episode 2 weeks from now. Till then, I'm Devyn.
I'm George, and this was Medicinema, your healthy dose of film.